The clock on her dashboard read 11:48 p.m. as Agent Kimberly Washington rubbed her tired eyes. 3 months of working undercover had taken its toll. Tonight had been particularly draining. 16 hours of sitting in her car, watching the same warehouse, taking photos of everyone who came and went. Her back ached from the uncomfortable driver's seat, and all she wanted was a hot shower and her bed. The streets were nearly empty this late. Streetlights cast long shadows across the road as Kimberly drove through the quiet neighborhood. She'd chosen the longer route home to clear her head, driving 5 miles under the speed limit, careful not to draw attention. The last thing she needed was trouble. She adjusted the air conditioning and rolled her shoulders, trying to work out the knots. Her phone buzzed with a message from her team leader. "Good work today." "Rest up." A small smile crossed her lips. The case was moving forward, slowly but surely. The flash of blue and red lights in her rearview mirror came out of nowhere. "You've got to be kidding me," Kimberly muttered, checking her speedometer. She hadn't been speeding. Her tags were current, and her brake lights were working fine. She'd just had her car serviced last week. With the practiced calm that came from years of law enforcement training, Kimberly signaled and pulled to the side of the road. She turned off the engine, placed her hands at the 10 and 2 positions on the steering wheel, and took a deep breath. Through her side mirror, she watched the police officer step out of his patrol car. He moved with a swagger, one hand already resting on his holster. An unnecessary stance for a routine traffic stop. Officer Bennett, as his nameplate would later reveal, took his time approaching her vehicle, flashlight beam dancing across her rear license plate before shining directly into her side mirror, momentarily blinding her. Kimberly knew the routine. She kept her hands visible, her voice steady. When the officer tapped on her window, she lowered it slowly. "License and registration," he demanded without greeting or explanation. His voice carried an edge that made Kimberly's trained instincts prickle with awareness. "Good evening, officer," she said calmly. "May I ask why I've been pulled over?" The beam of his flashlight moved across her face, lingering longer than necessary. "Taillights out," he said, though Kimberly knew that wasn't true. "I'm going to reach for my registration in the glove compartment," she stated clearly, making no sudden movements. "My license is in my purse on the passenger seat." The officer didn't acknowledge her words, just stared at her with narrowed eyes. His hand hadn't moved from his weapon. As Kimberly reached slowly toward the glove compartment, Officer Bennett's posture changed. In one fluid motion, his gun was drawn and pointed at her. "Hands where I can see them," he barked, his voice suddenly much louder in the quiet night. Kimberly froze, heart pounding but mind clear. She'd been trained for high-pressure situations, but having a gun pointed at her during a simple traffic stop wasn't something she expected tonight. "Officer, I'm complying with your orders," she said evenly. "I was just reaching for my registration as requested." "Yeah, sure you were," he replied, a note of sarcasm in his voice. "Everyone's just reaching for something." Taking another measured breath, Kimberly decided to reveal her profession. "Officer, I should inform you that I'm with federal law enforcement. I'm an FBI agent. If you'll allow me to show you my credentials." The laugh that cut through her words was sharp and dismissive. Officer Bennett's face broke into a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "An FBI agent, right." His flashlight beam ran up and down her casual clothes, jeans and a simple blouse. "And I'm the president. Let's try this again, shall we? Hands on the wheel, and don't move unless I tell you to." Little did he know, his condescending chuckle was about to be the last one he'd enjoy while wearing his badge. The air between them grew thick with tension. Officer Bennett kept his gun pointed at Kimberly, the barrel reflecting the flashing blue and red lights. A passing car slowed down, the driver clearly noticing the escalating situation, but Bennett paid no attention to the witness. "Step out of the vehicle," Bennett ordered, his voice harder now. His free hand moved to his radio, but he didn't call for backup. That struck Kimberly as odd. Most officers would radio in when they believed they were dealing with a potentially dangerous situation. "Officer, I'd like to comply, but I need to understand why you're asking me to exit my vehicle for a supposed taillight violation," Kimberly replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Years of FBI training had taught her how to remain composed even with a weapon pointed at her. Bennett's mouth twitched. "Are you refusing an officer's orders?" No, sir. I'm requesting clarification while keeping my hands visible exactly as instructed. Kimberly maintained eye contact, her training kicking in. She was documenting everything in her memory: his badge number, the time, his exact words, the fact that his body camera light was on, but he hadn't called in the stop. Bennett leaned closer to the window, his flashlight beam moving from her face to scan the interior of her car. The light paused on a folder on her passenger seat, case notes that thankfully had no visible markings indicating they were FBI materials. "What's that?" he demanded, gesturing with the flashlight. "Work papers," Kimberly answered truthfully, though incompletely. "Officer, I understand you're doing your job, but I would like to speak with your supervisor." That request seemed to touch a nerve. Bennett's expression darkened, and he stepped back from the car door. "Out, now." Each word was clipped and cold. "Hands where I can see them." Kimberly knew she had choices to make. She could continue to assert her rights and request a supervisor, which was legally justified but might further aggravate this already volatile situation. Or she could comply now and address the officer's misconduct through proper channels later. Safety first, she decided. "I'm opening my door slowly," she narrated her movements, a habit from her training. "My hands are visible. I'm not reaching for anything." As she stepped out into the cool night air, the police cruiser's spotlight nearly blinded her. She squinted against the harsh light, keeping her hands raised to shoulder level. The asphalt was rough beneath her sensible work shoes as she stood beside her car. Bennett circled her like a predator, his gun still drawn. "Hands on the hood," he instructed. "Officer," Kimberly tried once more. "Before this goes any further, I need to inform you that I am a federal agent, and this stop is being recorded." Bennett actually laughed at that. It wasn't a warm laugh. It was the kind that made the hair on the back of Kimberly's neck stand up. "Let me guess," he said with obvious sarcasm, "you've got a hidden camera. The FBI is watching us right now." He gestured broadly to the empty road. "I don't see your backup agent." The way he said "agent" dripped with disbelief. What Bennett didn't know was that Kimberly had activated her phone's emergency protocol when she first saw the flashing lights. A standard procedure she followed during potentially dangerous situations. The phone in her pocket was silently connecting to FBI dispatch, its microphone capturing every word. "Sir, my credentials are in my inside jacket pocket," Kimberly said calmly. "I'm going to reach for them very slowly." "Don't move," Bennett snapped, stepping closer. His breath smelled of coffee and mint as he invaded her personal space. "You know how many people try to reach for something during a traffic stop? How am I supposed to know what you're really grabbing for?" "That's why I'm telling you exactly what I'm doing," Kimberly explained, patience still in her voice despite the ridiculous situation. "I'm reaching for my FBI credentials that will verify everything I've told you." Bennett's radio crackled suddenly. A voice came through asking for his status and location. He hesitated, then keyed his radio. Just a routine traffic stop, under control. What he didn't realize was that his next few minutes on duty would be anything but routine. The standoff continued under the harsh glow of the street lamp. A light drizzle had begun to fall, tiny droplets reflecting the red and blue lights from the police cruiser. Kimberly felt the dampness on her skin, but her focus remained razor-sharp. This wasn't her first difficult encounter with local law enforcement during her 10 years with the Bureau, but it was certainly the most aggressive. "Look," she said, keeping her voice level. "We can resolve this quickly. All you need to do is allow me to show you my credentials." Officer Bennett's jaw tightened. He was young, probably no more than 4 or 5 years on the force, Kimberly guessed. The way he held his weapon suggested proper training, but his judgment was clearly compromised by something. Bias? Inexperience? A bad day? Whatever it was, she needed to de-escalate before someone got hurt. "Turn around," Bennett ordered, ignoring her request. "Hands behind your back." Kimberly felt a cold knot form in her stomach. This was going too far. "Officer, I'm going to comply, but I want to be clear that this is happening under protest. You have no probable cause to detain me." "I'll determine what's probable cause," he shot back. "You've been uncooperative during a lawful traffic stop." As she slowly turned around, Kimberly spoke clearly, aware that her phone was still recording. "For the record, I've been cooperative throughout this entire interaction." I've kept my hands visible, spoken respectfully, and attempted multiple times to identify myself as a federal agent. She heard Bennett scoff behind her. Yeah, right. The FBI hires a lot of people who drive around at midnight in beat-up Toyotas. We do when they're working undercover, Kimberly replied calmly. She could feel Bennett step closer behind her. But before he could reach for his handcuffs, distant sirens cut through the night air. Bennett froze, his attention diverted momentarily. Kimberly didn't move a muscle. You call for backup, she asked, though she knew the answer. Bennett didn't respond, his confusion evident in his silence. The sirens grew louder, approaching quickly from both directions of the street. Whoever was coming, they were in a hurry. Last chance, Officer Bennett, Kimberly said, her voice taking on a new tone of authority. Check my credentials before this gets worse for you. Something in her voice must have finally gotten through to him. Perhaps it was her use of his name, which he hadn't provided. Or maybe it was the confidence with which she spoke as the sirens drew nearer. Fine, he said, taking a half step back though his gun remained pointed at her. Reach for your ID. Slowly. With deliberate movements, Kimberly reached inside her jacket and removed her FBI badge and ID card. The gold shield caught the flashing lights as she held it up. Federal Bureau of Investigation, she said. I'm a special agent assigned to the Organized Crime Division. I'm currently working undercover on a case that's now been potentially compromised by this unnecessary detention. Bennett's eyes widened as he leaned forward to inspect the badge. For the first time, doubt crept into his expression. This could be fake, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Call the number on the back, Kimberly suggested. They'll verify my identity. Or you can wait about 30 seconds for my colleagues to arrive. As if on cue, two unmarked black SUVs rounded the corner, emergency lights flashing behind their grills. They screeched to a halt, boxing in Bennett's patrol car. The color drained from Bennett's face as four individuals in FBI windbreakers emerged from the vehicles, weapons drawn. FBI, lower your weapon, officer, shouted a tall man with salt and pepper hair, Deputy Director Thomas Chen, Kimberly's direct supervisor. Bennett's arm trembled slightly, his gun still pointed at Kimberly. Officer Bennett, Kimberly said softly, for your own safety, please lower your weapon now. Time seemed to stand still. Raindrops fell in slow motion. The red and blue lights painted the scene in alternating hues. Bennett stood frozen, suddenly understanding the gravity of his mistake. Finally, he lowered his gun. Smart decision, Kimberly said, turning to face him fully. Now, would you like to explain to my team why you've been holding a federal agent at gunpoint during a traffic stop for a taillight that isn't actually broken? The night air grew heavy with tension. Officer Bennett's hand dropped to his side, his gun now pointed at the wet asphalt. His face had turned an ashen gray in the flashing lights as the reality of his situation sank in. Four FBI agents stood with their weapons drawn, their expressions professional but stern. Holster your weapon, Officer Bennett, Deputy Director Chen instructed firmly. His voice was calm but carried unmistakable authority. Bennett complied mechanically, his movements stiff as he secured his gun. Chen nodded to the other agents, who lowered their weapons but remained vigilant. He then turned to Kimberly. Agent Washington, are you all right? I'm fine, sir, she replied, her composure intact despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Just a misunderstanding that escalated unnecessarily. A misunderstanding? Bennett finally found his voice, though it came out higher than normal. How was I supposed to know she was actually FBI? Deputy Director Chen turned his attention to the officer. She told you, repeatedly, from what I heard over the open line. She offered to show you her credentials. Instead, you drew your weapon on a federal agent without cause. Bennett swallowed hard. I was following protocol for suspicious behavior. What suspicious behavior would that be? Kimberly asked, her voice level but firm. Driving 5 miles under the speed limit? Having all my documentation in order? Or was it something else that made me suspicious to you, Officer Bennett? The uncomfortable silence that followed spoke volumes. One of the FBI agents approached Chen and whispered something. Chen nodded, then addressed Bennett again. The local police chief has been notified and is en route. Your body camera has been recording, correct? Bennett's hand instinctively went to the small device on his chest. The tiny red light confirmed it was active. "Yes," he said quietly. "Good," Chen replied. "That will make this process much simpler." Headlights appeared down the road as another vehicle approached. A police SUV with chief insignia. It pulled up behind the FBI vehicles, and a tall woman in a police uniform stepped out, her face set in a grim expression. Police Chief Rivera took in the scene quickly, her experienced eyes noting every detail. "Would someone care to explain what's happening here?" she asked, her gaze moving from the FBI agents to Bennett and back. Deputy Director Chen stepped forward. "Chief Rivera, I'm Thomas Chen, FBI. One of my agents was detained at gunpoint by Officer Bennett during what should have been a routine traffic stop, if it was justified at all." Chief Rivera's expression darkened as she turned to Bennett. "Is this accurate, officer?" Bennett shifted uncomfortably. "I pulled her over for a broken taillight, and the situation escalated when she made sudden movements." "My taillights are working perfectly," Kimberly interjected calmly. "And I narrated every movement before I made it, keeping my hands visible at all times." Chief Rivera nodded to one of her officers who had arrived with her. "Check the vehicle's taillights." The officer walked to Kimberly's car and inspected both taillights, then returned. "Both functioning normally, Chief." A heavy silence fell over the scene. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped from the trees lining the street. Chief Rivera took a deep breath and turned to Bennett. "Officer Bennett, I'll need your weapon and badge." Bennett's eyes widened. "Chief, you can't be serious. It was a simple mistake." "A simple mistake that could have resulted in tragedy," she cut him off firmly. "Your weapon and badge now." With shaking hands, Bennett unclipped his badge and removed his gun belt, handing both to the chief. The weight of his actions seemed to finally hit him as he stood there, stripped of the symbols of his authority. "We'll review the body camera footage immediately," Chief Rivera said. She turned to Kimberly and the FBI team. "Agent Washington, I apologize for this officer's conduct. I assure you, this matter will be handled with the utmost seriousness." Kimberly nodded, her professional demeanor intact. "I appreciate that, Chief." As if to punctuate the gravity of the situation, another police car arrived. Two officers stepped out and approached Chief Rivera, who spoke quietly to them. They nodded and walked toward Bennett. "Officer James Bennett," one of them said formally, "you're being placed on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." The irony wasn't lost on anyone present as the handcuffs clicked shut around Bennett's wrists, the very same action he had been about to perform on Kimberly just minutes earlier. The blue and red lights continued to paint the wet street as Officer Bennett was guided into the back of a police cruiser. His face was a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and growing fear. Through the window, Kimberly could see him staring straight ahead, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. Chief Rivera turned to Deputy Director Chen and Kimberly, her expression serious but apologetic. "I'd appreciate if you both would come down to the station. We need to take formal statements, and I want to review that body camera footage immediately." "Of course," Chen nodded. He glanced at his watch. "Agent Washington has been on duty for over 16 hours, but I understand the urgency." Kimberly's exhaustion had been temporarily forgotten in the adrenaline of the confrontation, but now it crept back into her bones. Still, she stood tall. "I'm fine to give my statement now, sir." A small crowd had begun to gather on the sidewalk, people from nearby homes drawn by the unusual number of police vehicles. Some had phones out, recording the scene. Kimberly noticed this and turned away slightly, mindful of her undercover status. "Let's move this to the station," Chief Rivera said, also noticing the onlookers. "Agent Washington, would you like one of my officers to drive your vehicle, or would you prefer to follow us?" "I'll drive myself," Kimberly replied. The last thing she wanted was to be separated from her car, which contained case notes from her ongoing investigation. The procession to the police station moved through the quiet streets of the city. Kimberly followed the police cruisers, her mind racing despite her fatigue. What had started as a routine, albeit unjustified, traffic stop had exploded into something that would likely make headlines by morning. At the station, the fluorescent lights seemed painfully bright after the darkness of the night. Officers looked up from their desks with curious expressions as Chief Rivera led Kimberly and Deputy Director Chen to a conference room. The chief's expression made it clear that questions would have to wait. "Officer Lee," Rivera called to a young officer near the front desk, "bring us the equipment to review body camera footage, please." As they settled into the conference room, a tense silence fell. Chen broke it first. "Chief Rivera, I want to be clear that Agent Washington has our full support in however she wishes to proceed with this matter." The chief nodded solemnly. As she should. What happened tonight was unacceptable. Officer Lee returned with a laptop and cable. He connected Bennett's body camera, downloaded the footage, and pulled it up on the screen before quietly excusing himself from the room. The three of them watched in silence as the scene unfolded from Bennett's perspective. The camera captured everything: his approach to Kimberly's car, the immediate hostility in his tone, the quick escalation to drawing his weapon, the dismissive laugh when she identified herself as FBI, and his continued aggression despite her calm compliance. When the video ended, Chief Rivera leaned back in her chair, her face grim. "There's no justification for any of this. The taillight excuse was clearly fabricated. Your lights are working perfectly in the video." His conduct violated at least 6 departmental policies that I can count immediately. She turned to Kimberly. "Agent Washington, I can't apologize enough for what you experienced tonight. Officer Bennett's actions do not reflect the values or training of this department." Kimberly's response was measured. "I appreciate that, Chief. But I have to ask, what happens next? Because this isn't just about me. If Officer Bennett treats a federal agent this way, how does he treat ordinary citizens who don't have the FBI arriving as backup?" The question hung in the air. Chief Rivera didn't flinch from it. "A fair and important question. Bennett will face an immediate internal affairs investigation. His actions tonight alone are grounds for termination, in my view. But I want to be transparent with you. I'm also going to order a review of his previous stops and arrests. If this reflects a pattern, there could be criminal charges." Deputy Director Chen nodded approvingly. "That sounds appropriate." Chief Rivera wasn't finished. "And Agent Washington, if you're willing, I'd like to discuss how we might work together to ensure this kind of incident doesn't happen again, not to federal agents and not to any citizens of this city." For the first time that night, Kimberly felt a glimmer of hope breaking through her exhaustion. Chief Rivera stepped up to the microphones first, her uniform crisp, her expression resolute. "Last night, an incident occurred involving one of our officers and an FBI agent that falls far below the standards we set for our department. The officer has been suspended without pay, and criminal charges are being considered." She paused, looking directly into the cameras. "But more importantly, this incident has prompted a full review of our departmental practices. We are committed to ensuring that every citizen receives fair, respectful treatment from our officers, regardless of who they are or what they look like." As Kimberly watched from the doorway, she felt a complex mix of emotions. The incident had been traumatic, but perhaps some good would come from it. As a black woman in law enforcement, she'd faced bias throughout her career. As an FBI agent, she had the power and platform to demand accountability in a way many citizens didn't. A young reporter called out, "Agent Washington, will you be filing a lawsuit?" Kimberly stepped forward, her posture straight, her voice clear. "This isn't about money. It's about ensuring that what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else." 6 months later, the auditorium was packed to capacity. Law enforcement officers from across the city filled the seats, some shifting uncomfortably as they waited for the presentation to begin. Kimberly stood at the side of the stage, adjusting her microphone one final time. Next to her, Chief Rivera went over her notes. "Still can't believe the turnout," Rivera murmured. 300 officers signed up for this training." Kimberly smiled. "Change happens when people understand why it matters." The lights dimmed and Chief Rivera stepped to the podium. "Good morning, everyone. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for our department. As many of you know, an incident 6 months ago forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about biases and procedures within our force." She paused, letting her words sink in. Former Officer Bennett was convicted last month of unlawful detention, civil rights violations, and misconduct. His actions that night violated everything we stand for as protectors of our community. Kimberly watched the officers' reactions closely. Some nodded thoughtfully, others looked down at their shoes. But today isn't about Bennett, Rivera continued. Today is about building a better department. I'm proud to introduce Agent Kimberly Washington, who has generously agreed to lead this crucial initiative. As Kimberly took the stage, she felt the weight of 100 eyes on her. She clicked the remote, and the first slide appeared. A photo from Bennett's body camera, showing her with hands raised while he pointed his gun at her. "This was me 6 months ago," she began, her voice steady. "A federal agent with 10 years of service, held at gunpoint for driving while black. But I'm not here to make you uncomfortable with just my story. I'm here because every week, citizens in our community face similar situations without the protection of a badge or backup arriving just in time." The next slide shows statistics from the department's internal review, disparity in traffic stops, use of force incidents, and complaint investigations. "These numbers don't lie," Kimberly said, "and they shouldn't exist. Our job is to serve and protect everyone equally." For the next hour, Kimberly led the session with a balance of statistics, real scenarios, and interactive discussions. She shared stories from her career, both as an FBI agent and as a black woman navigating the world. A young officer raised his hand. "Agent Washington, how do we know when we're letting bias affect our judgment?" "Great question," Kimberly replied. "Start by asking yourself, would I handle this situation the same way if the person looked different? Are my assumptions based on facts or stereotypes? Am I escalating a situation that could be de-escalated?" As the session progressed, the initial tension in the room began to ease. Officers started asking more questions, sharing their own concerns and experiences. "This training isn't about punishment," Kimberly emphasized. "It's about making you better at your jobs and keeping our communities safer. When we treat all citizens with respect, everyone wins." Chief Rivera joined her on stage for the closing remarks. "Today's session is just the beginning. Agent Washington will be working with us over the next year to implement new procedures and ongoing training programs." After the presentation, several officers approached Kimberly to shake her hand. One veteran officer, his gray hair neatly trimmed, waited until the crowd thinned. "I've been on the force for 22 years, he said quietly. "I'm not proud to admit this, but I might have been headed down the same path as Bennett. Today opened my eyes." "Thank you." Kimberly nodded, touched by his honesty. "Thank you for being willing to learn and change." As the auditorium emptied, Deputy Director Chen appeared beside her. "Impressive work, Washington. The Bureau is proud of how you've handled this whole situation." "Just trying to make sure my worst night becomes someone else's better future," she replied. Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds. As Kimberly walked to her car, the same one Bennett had stopped that night, she reflected on the journey. What started as a traumatic incident had become a catalyst for real change. Her phone buzzed with a message from Chief Rivera. "First session a success. More departments want to join the program. Are you ready to expand this nationwide?" Kimberly smiled as she typed her response. "Let's do it. Change has to start somewhere." As she drove away from the station, Kimberly felt something she hadn't expected 6 months ago: gratitude. Not for the incident itself, but for the opportunity to transform injustice into progress. Sometimes the darkest moments bring the brightest changes. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in months, Kimberly felt truly hopeful about the direction they were heading.